Hello and welcome back to Flywheel. So today we're going to go into a full tutorial about how to build a flywheel blaster, which I think will be quite fun. To start off, we will be looking at everything you will need to do this. First of all, to power the thing, you will be needing a LiPo battery, 3S or 2S, although depending on your choice here, the choice you have in motors will vary. I have a 3S LiPo, which means it has 3 cells. You will therefore also need a charger. Make sure the charger you choose have balanced charging, which means it charges all cells equally. Next up, you're gonna need a soldering iron with some solder. Have a soldering iron, not a soldering gun, as that will be easier for you. And then, as mentioned, wire. I use 8 gauge wire as I find that the best because it is thin enough to get in most places, but it's thick enough to sustain quite a high load of electricity flowing through them. And then this is a tool which is very helpful, as you can like put wires together, and they come with most soldering kits. And then this thing is also something I would highly suggest buying if you're gonna do this. It's just something which you can put your soldering iron in and then wet this sponge, and then you are pretty good to go with soldering, because then there's some place to actually rest the thing. As well as this, you will need shrink tubes, which are very important, so you don't have any open wires, so that you have plastic covering everywhere, so you don't get any shortages or anything like that in the build. What you do with this is basically heat it up and it will shrink around the wires. You will also be wanting wire cutters like this, so you can cut the wires. And what's important with actual wire cutters is that you can cut the wires and not just cut it, but leave the metal open so you can actually solder it. A glue gun will come in handy to glue switches in and such, and I find it just really important to have. You could use epoxy too at some parts. I find this one, EP200 from out of darts, really nice because it settles very fast and it gets really hard, so good for putting switches in place as well. But there are also some 3D printed one as for more popular blasters such as the Strife, where you can just glue it in. That's what I have used, and that, I have to say, works better. You will need screwdrivers, or yeah, Phillips head screwdrivers like this. They're really nice, as well as mechanical lube and Loctite. Loctite means that the screws you screw in won't go out as easily, and this is important for when screwing in the motors. Okay, now we're going to talk some about the hardware. We're going to get into more detail when we're looking inside the master and such for the full-on tutorial, but right now I just want to go over the basics. Flywheel cage. This is very important. This is basically what you put your motors into, like this, from the back. This one was didn't really go very well, so the motors doesn't fit well because I 3D printed it myself. Anyways, you put the motors in here, and then you can screw them in with the motor screws, which are important to have. Will come with most motors you buy. You can choose between 130, 132 and 180 motors. I would go with either 130 motors or 180, since 132 you have to cut up the bolster, but it's not that big of a performance gap between 130 and 132. although between 180 and 130 there is a bit bigger gap, so if you want to cut up in your blaster for maximum performance, you could go for an 180 motor. Then we're gonna look at flywheels. These are some really nice flywheels, although did not work for me. Click here to view the video where I talk about why I do not recommend these, but that was more about issues with them actually working in the long run, but they are great for performance. But as any other flywheels, you put them on the motor, and because they have these holes, so then they will sit on these on the flywheel cage and spin, which means darts like this, when they spin, gets pushed into here and therefore fly out. And that's basically how a flywheel blaster works. Now you can have a full mechanical where it's just a trigger goes in and then a piston goes and fires one dart, or you can have full auto, which I will show in this blaster guide. If you want to keep it semi-auto and you have already a semi-auto blaster, then you don't have to do anything with the pusher at all. But you can remove some pusher locks if they are in place. Now we're gonna look at some smaller pieces. Switches. I find these smaller switches really nice for the pusher and can be used for rev trigger, but I suggest bigger 21 ohm switches for that instead, as I have one in the blaster which I can show, because they can handle more current, which will be needed for the pair of motors which is found in the flywheel cage compared to what is found in the pusher, where there's only one motor, of course. And then you will be wanting a pair of connectors. My connectors of choice are XT60, as all my LiPo batteries, as you can see here, come with XT60 connectors. So what you'll get is a pair of these sitting together like that. Now the only one you really need is this, because that's what the battery plugs into in the blaster. So this is important to actually get the LiPo battery like connected to everything. Although remember, you don't want to cause any shortages or anything, because LiPo batteries are dangerous. So use heat shrinks when connecting this. Now we can get to opening the blaster. Okay, that was all for this video. If you want to check out my merch, that is in the description below. 15% off currently for the next 2 weeks. The next video in the series is coming soon. It will be here if it's already on at the time of you watching this video, and if not, you'll just have to wait 1 or 2 weeks. So have a good time, and I'll see you in the next video.